Hi, I'm Jim Hemphill, features writer from IndieWire, and this is our craft roundtable on costume design, the craft that helps define character through style, texture, and detail. From subtle choices through bold statements, costumes play a key role in how stories are told on screen. Our guests today are from Spider-Noir, Traycee Gigi Field, from Love Story, Rudy Mance, from Euphoria, Natasha Newman-Thomas, from Hacks and the Paper, Kathleen Felix-Hager, and from The Beauty, Sarah Evelyn. Sarah and Rudy, I'm going to start with you since you're both on Ryan Murphy shows. And Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the last time we talked, you told me that Ryan Murphy actually has a position that is costume producer. So how does that work?
Costume producer is Lou Eyrich. The idea is really to help streamline things for the department. And also at the moments that there are very big creative asks in costume design, which happens all the time. In costume design, you know, like I wish we were just designers, but also we actually do, depending on where you are, have a big hand in the budget and the labor. So it's like sometimes when those big creative asks come, the most difficult part is being like, how am I going to get enough time in the day to go make my case to the producers and do the creative I need to do? And I feel like at that moment, Lou Eyrich also will get involved and kind of like go do that battle for you. Like, here is what the department needs to make this happen so that you can just focus on the creative, which I wish I had this on every single show of mine. You know, sometimes I feel like, oh my God, I just got to design for 75 seconds. That was amazing, because you feel like your whole day can be taken up with logistics, especially the bigger and bigger all these shows get.
Another great way to work with Lou is, you know, Ryan Murphy really does treat the costumes like a main character. And so he likes to look at every fitting photo. He likes to approve every single look that goes to camera. And with Ryan, you know, he has anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 shows going at the same time. So Lou really is a conduit to get to him to get everything approved and keep everything on schedule.
I'm just curious, for the rest of you, have you also found in your experience that it's like what Sarah's saying, where you spend a lot more of your time than people might think on logistics rather than actual designing?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm split down the middle. It's like half organization and like half like creative.
Problem solving.
You know what I mean? It's like you've got to like have that brain in order to like make sure that everything is gonna happen when it needs to happen. Also just like, how much is this gonna cost, and do I have to go fight for something? And so having multiple skills, like, yes, I love the creative part. If I only had to do the creative part, like, oh my God. But that's not the case. So it's like, you know, you really do need to understand your budget, and you really do have to have the skills to go and talk to a producer about, you know, negotiations in terms of money. And so I think that people don't really realize that that's part of our job. And I mean, I wish it wasn't, but that's just the way it is.
I feel like it's just a relationship that you build, and I'm sure that it's the case with like Lou or Ryan, whatever, whoever you're working with. Like, the more you work with them, the more they trust you. Some of those decisions, they will allow you to, like, you know, just run with the creative. I mean, there is an approval process on every show. Some are more hands-on than others, but I feel like I've been really fortunate on Hacks to be able to let the characters and the costumes sort of be such a creative part of telling the story of these people on the show, and I felt very appreciated by my producers in that endeavor, which I think is maybe kind of rare.
When you do multiple projects with the same producers and they know you, you know, it's like you definitely have more leeway, and they definitely trust you. And like, you know, the producers that I work with, they know that I'm never gonna ask for something unless I really need it. Like, they know that I'm level-headed. They know that I'm not gonna come and say I have to spend like $20,000 on a dress unless I really do need to spend $20,000 on a dress. So it's like cultivating those relationships, I think, is extremely important, and it does help, you know, grease the wheels a little bit about, you know, having a space to be even more creative, because you know that you can go and ask for things and they might give it to you.
I agree that if you really build that trust, then it helps. But I also feel like if you have a great costume supervisor that you work with, it definitely helps give you a little more creative time. I feel very blessed to have a costume supervisor that takes a lot of that off my plate. And just numbers-wise, it's always a constant discussion, but it definitely gives me a little more room to be creative.
Well, and all of these shows that we're talking about today are like massively ambitious. As department heads, how do you manage the number of people you have to manage and kind of make sure that everyone's on the same page, making the same show?
You're the person that everyone is looking to. So it's like how you lead your crew is a lot of times how your crew is going to behave. Also, they're really tired. Like, you got to get people to do things for you, all that stuff. Honestly, I haven't figured out yet. My solve is not sleeping much. You know, like I feel like the daytime is for questions, and then when everyone goes home, like the nighttime is for designing. I can't wait till the moment that that's not the case. Every show I'm like, maybe this is a show where, you know, but so far, no.
I mean, I'm nothing without my team, and I have such an amazing team. And I was doing Hacks, and I also do a show called The Paper, and they overlapped a little bit, so that was my first time experiencing working on 2 shows at the same time, which was a lot of juggling and time. I would call Traycee and be like, how does this work? Because she's done it a lot. And it's tricky, and so you really have to depend on your crews, and, you know, costume design is, yes, we're the head of the department, but it's very much a village to take these big, massive shows that we do to get all the costumes. And it's not just principals, it's, you know, background actors, and it all tells the story. And Hacks especially is a really big show. It's a little half-hour comedy, but it's such a big scale. We shoot multiple episodes at the same time. And we started out the season on location, so we had just the logistics of everything was a big, huge puzzle. So my supervisor's incredible, and just grateful to work with a team that supports me in such a tangible way.
Yeah, you're always as good as your team.
Yeah.
And, you know, the team is the most important, you know.
Yeah, I
and I'm
agree.
talking, you know, from all of us as designers down to the PAs, you know. Every single job is important and necessary.
I mean, on Spider-Noir, it was the best costume department I've ever had in my career. I do think as the costume designer, you set the tone. I have a very strong work ethic, and, you know, I think that I've heard that people say that if you work with me, you have to work hard. And I actually take that as a compliment, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm working hard. It's like, I want to do the best job possible, and I am an overachiever. And I'm very hands-on, so like everybody in my department knows me. They know they can come and talk to me. You know, I'm always on the trailer, I'm always on set, I'm always in the office, I'm like everywhere. And I literally talk to everyone in my department. Even though I had like 45 people, it's like between the workroom and like the people that were on set and in the office, it's like very much a community, and it's very much a collaborative effort. I can't do it by myself, and I rely on them. And so I want them to be able to rely on me as well.
Talk a little bit about what some of the references and influences were for Spider-Noir, because one of the really cool things about that show is these very different worlds it's coming from that you kind of unify.
The comic book itself was something that, you know, inspired me, only because I really wanted the actual villains to like kind of correlate with the color palette, and also just have a feel so that when they, you know, when you first see them, you know exactly who they are. And in terms of like reference, I mean, Humphrey Bogart was a big one for Nick Cage, just even down to like the trench coat that he wore. You know, we tried to get really specific with those kinds of things, and also reference the 30s. It was a lot to put those 2 worlds together, I think.
Say nighty-night and kiss me. Just hold me tight and tell me you'll miss me. While I'm alone and blue as can be, dream a little dream of me.
And how important were the hats? I mean, I feel like that's the big thing in this show.
The hats are super important in the way that, like, for me, they complete the look. For the femme fatale, for Kat Hardy, like, those hats really, like, sealed the deal. They just gave her the that she needed. We needed a specific block, which is how you create a hat. We found it in the Ukraine. We got it just in time, which I'm sure everyone can relate to. The fitting was the day before we were supposed to shoot it. So, you know, no stress, no pressure, but like it's those kinds of things I think that like I thrive on, but also freak me out. It's like, it's such a big part of the job, but also you just gotta like, you're putting out fires every day, and you're also just like, well, I gotta do what I gotta do. So do I need to get on the plane and go to the Ukraine and get the, like, you know, I've offered to do that so many times. Like,
thinking about like having to get stuff from the Ukraine or Japan, Etsy, or the things you're talking about, I mean, how much of your job is this kind of detective work almost of just like having to find this stuff?
So much.
Yeah,
Like late at night, you're like, okay, I can't sleep, so I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna look for it on my phone. And sometimes it's the golden hour. You're like, oh my God, I found it.
This season of Euphoria, at least, we'd get rewrites a lot throughout the season. So there would be an item that I thought was like pretty hard to source that would then connect to a scene that was an action scene that was originally not supposed to need multiples.
Oh no.
And then you have to source multiples or create them. And all of those resources are very helpful. The eBays, the Etsys, the Depops.
I feel like that's why it's like never just like, oh, it's just costumes. Like even you'll have a situation of something that should be really easy, like scrubs. Oh, but you got some rewrites, or a script came out, or an actor was cast last minute, and you get their casting, and the scrub store is closed, and the director has asked you for blue scrubs, but you only have green scrubs, and they work the next morning first thing, but they have to go into hair and makeup first. Like, you are not going to deliver those scrubs. It's your job, but all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm out like on a scrub show. Like, why is it like as if I'm like on a 1940 show looking for a hat block from the Ukraine? Like, I'm gonna have to break into the scrub store. Like, you're like, A, do I break into the scrub store? B, do I know anyone on a scrub show? Not in LA. Okay, in New York, do I fly to New York? It's just like,
can I get a costume house to open it up early for me?
This happens in every costume department now, just because the shows are big, the casting is last minute. You know, and it's like, we really feel it's our job to deliver.
Always.
Sarah, don't worry,
And
they
that
cut
tells
that
people
scene.
I know. Oh my God. Precisely.
That is absolutely what happens. We have like jumped through so many fiery hoops, like get the thing in the right color. We got it on the actor, we're ready to go, and they're like, yeah, no. So we're not gonna shoot that part of the scene. We're gonna like rewrite that. And you're like, wah wah.
Or like you said, you need 14 multiples.
Yeah.
They used 2.
Exactly.
Oh,
Well, yeah,
always.
the Cassie's wedding dress.
Yeah. But
How
it's
many
better
did
to
you
have
make?
too many.
7.
Yeah, but it's like no is not an option. Like
No,
that's
no
not
is
in
never an
your
option.
like vocabulary.
Better to
So
be
like
more
I
prepared.
feel like we're all problem solvers, right? Someone throws something at you and you're like, in real life you would be like, well, that's impossible. I can't do that. But in your work life, you're like, oh my God, I got to figure out how to make this happen in 10 hours. So it's a different way of thinking. Like there's
solve.
no is not an option.
And then Rudy, on Love Story, I have to say, like, the period detail is incredible. What was the research process like?
Everywhere, and I think we can all attest to this. It's like every book you can find, every magazine you can find, every Instagram account you can find. And again, going back to you're only as good as your team, I mean, they would find weird, random, accounts that would have grainy black and white footage from a video camera, and they would do stills from that. And so in dressing the two of them, my team and I really tried to be as exact as possible. We had so many fittings. I mean, the actors shoot anywhere from 8 till 15 hours a day, and then we either can get them for 15 minutes before they go through hair and makeup at 5 a.m. or if you don't tell the ADs and you sneak in a fitting at lunch if they're okay with it. With Paul, I would be like, so we have about 15 looks to do, and I know you just shot for 12 hours, but like, do you want a drink? And so, but they were both incredible. They wanted to get it just as right and just as accurate as I did. It sort of looked like by the end of the shoot, the fitting room looked like, I was like a crazy, obsessive serial killer, because it was literally every single photograph I could find of the two of them. And then, once you would get the script, you would sort of look at, all right, let's do this look for here. And then, I would show them the picture of what we were recreating, and then they would do the same pose, and then we would do a side by side. And so yeah, it was just, wherever we could find the stuff then. And then if we couldn't find it, we would make it. But my team went everywhere from, Etsy in the Ukraine for a Prada bag, a coat that she wore that was like a men's Patagonia coat, not fashion at all, but we found one in on Japanese eBay. Wow. And so it was, wherever we could find the stuff, we did.
Mistress and cure his heart.
How did you approach, for Carolyn, like the scenes before she was in the public eye?
Yeah, that was one of the trickiest parts. I essentially worked backwards, where I looked at the pieces of clothing that she was wearing, the designers that she was choosing to wear, and then I sort of worked backwards, and I let that sort of inform me, you know, where she had started and then where she ended, and then just evaluated it that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, Natasha, with Euphoria, what kinds of conversations did you have with Sam Levinson about where you were going to take the characters this season? Because there's this sort of jump forward in time. They all kind of have looks that are evolutions of where they've been, but they all are very different.
Well, I read the first several scripts, and then Sam and I kind of put a whole day aside in pre-production to sort of just dream together and talk about what happened in those 5 years and how it would inform their new identities as young adults. I mean, Lexi, it felt like the natural progression. She probably went to like liberal arts college and got really into like vintage because someone told her how bad fast fashion is for the environment. And like then she realized, oh, I can embrace my individualism by buying pieces that no one else can find, and kind of bringing that into this Hollywood lens of like working behind the scenes and also projecting like her fantasy of a success story there, and kind of like dressing for the job she wants with the means she's given.
Now, how did you approach Rue? Because I've heard you, in other interviews, I've heard you describe like Rue as kind of a chameleon, like she kind of adapts to her environment. So how did that inform your approach to her costumes?
In my mind, she's just kind of collecting things wherever she goes and assimilates into that world. Like in Mexico, she wears shirts she maybe found, you know, in the bar there. When she's in Laurie's world, it's a little bit more workwear adjacent. And once she starts working at the Silver Slipper, you see kind of slight Western tinges, but it's always like very subtle because you don't want to feel a big emotional shift. It's just kind of her working her way through each world under the radar.
There we go.
And then how did you approach a new character like Alamo, who's got a great look?
Alamo is so fun, but they originally had someone else come in for the camera test and were like, this is who we're gonna cast. And so there was this real clear vision that Sam and I had when that guy came in. And then when they recast Ed Wale, it just went out the window and we started over because he is such a big presence and the energy was so different. Like you didn't need to say quite as much with his costumes because his energy does that on its own.
Now, Kathleen, you talked about there being some overlap between Hacks and the paper. And so I guess first I'm curious with Hacks, talk a little bit about how you see Deborah and Ava's costumes having evolved.
Yeah, I mean, we first meet the character of Ava, you know, she's in her early 20s, just coming to LA. She's new, she wants to be a writer. She has a very kind of almost juvenile aspect to her wardrobe at that point. By the end of the series, she's 30. So we were really conscious every year of showing her evolution, just growing up a little bit. By season 5, she's making money. So she was able to buy like investment pieces. Her basic vibe is the same, but it's just more sophisticated and just more grown up.
I'm going to compete in the best audiobook category by recording my memoir.
You wrote a memoir? That's great.
Well, no, not yet. But I happen to know the best writer in the world.
Oh.
Tony Kushner.
Hey, what about me?
You can't write my memoir. You're too obsessed with me.
It's cool. I gave up on developing my prose skills when I realized Gen Alpha can't read.
It was interesting for me to work with Hannah, the actress, because it was a very similar journey in her personal, like she was in her early 20s. Hacks was her first show. She wasn't that confident, you know? I mean, it was all new. So it was like, it was a very similar trajectory of her growth with Ava's growth. So it was really interesting to explore that with her. It was very important for Hannah to represent all that Ava was, you know, this young, queer, kind of messy person that was searching. So we really tried to make her as real as we could.
And what are the advantages of being on a show like that where you're on it for several years and getting to know the actors?
I mean, that relationship is everything. Like when you're in the fitting room with an actor, when you first start the process, it's all like a game, right? You're trying to figure out who this person is, who this character is, and you're trying on these pieces. And then there's a moment in the fitting where the actor will put something on. I'm sure everyone's experienced it, where like they're like, oh, all of a sudden they stand different and they start to walk a little different and they start to, like, you can see them embody this character, and that's like magic, right? I mean, it's so incredible to be part of that process and help an actor like feel that way.
You always know you've hit the mark when the actor starts reciting their lines, because they're like, I'm the character now, look at me. And then they're like trying it on for size. And so I always feel like that's the moment where you like really know that you've done a good job and help them create the visual storytelling of that character.
And then I always feel like if it doesn't work in the fitting room, it's never going to work on camera. It's never going to work when they put it in their trailer. I never want to talk an actor into anything because I feel like there's always another option. It's never going to be right. They're going to get on camera and feel...
Well, you never want to put any actor in anything that they're uncomfortable with. You know?
Or anything that'll detract from the performance, that will take them out of that mental headspace of the character.
Well, Sarah, you know, your show, The Beauty, is obviously like I would think, a dream for a costume designer because it's set in this world of high fashion.
Yeah.
And the use of color in the show is really incredible. And I'm curious, like, what kind of collaboration do you have with the production designer and the DP on that show?
One thing that is amazing about working with Ryan is that, like, a lot of times really to do that, you need that driven from the top, or everyone else doesn't make space and time for it. Like, we actually did so many camera tests, so much R&D. It's such an amazing dream because I do feel like that makes the frame look so much better, and you can say so much with color if it's coordinated.
What were some of the cinematic influences?
Bertolucci definitely was a big one. Ryan usually has ideas in his head, but he came to this meeting and the references were The Leopard, Passengers, and Last Tango in Paris, like kind of thematically and vibe and color, and The Hunger. And I was like, this is gonna be the best project ever. Also the hardest. I mean, I watched those movies so many times. He started with those 3 references, but like other things would creep in and you'd kind of like add it and subtract something else. Like, for example, in the beginning, we were gonna do a lot of oxblood and fluorescent green, but fluorescent green ended up falling off. You know, and I think other, like peach and like purple came into play.
We live in a world of perpetual upgrades, from iPhones to toothpaste to semi-glutides. If my Ponce de Leon boosters keep them alive and forever young, they'll be begging for it, like a diabetic cries out for insulin. That's like, what, 6 shots a day? There he is. Hey.
Kathleen, we talked about Hacks, but I want to talk about The Paper also. It's a new series, but it's also a spin-off of The Office. So is there an attempt to kind of, you know, I don't know, are there things from the visual language of The Office that influenced this that you wanted to carry over?
I approached it starting from scratch. The Paper is a very different show from The Office. It's a mockumentary, and it's a workplace comedy, and told in that same style, but you can never replicate The Office. And so I wanted these people in this world to feel real and current and now. And we have a very diverse cast. People have backstories. We try to keep them really grounded in reality, but also they have very distinct personal style. Like, The Office was of a time, and it's in its, you know, perfect little time capsule bubble. But it was fun to be able to, like, bring those things that people loved about The Office, but add a new layer of storytelling to the world.
Hey, I'm Ned. The door seems to be locked.
Yeah, because I locked it.
She locked it.
I'm Ned Sampson. I start here today. You can let me out.
We had a security breach a month ago. Can't be too sure.
Yeah, a guy on acid wandered in from a jazz festival.
Okay, well, that wasn't me.
Another one of those acid guys?
Yep.
Damn, must be the soft lighting.
What are the challenges of creating costumes for a show like that where it's a workplace comedy? So in a way, there's, you know, kind of a similar look that everybody's going to have, but you also have to differentiate between them?
We didn't want them to look office-y, so to speak. Esmeralda character, Sabrina Impacciatore, she's Italian. So we created this whole backstory, Sabrina and I, about she's Italian, she's, you know, she's divorced, she has a child, she's brought a bunch of clothes from Italy with her, but she shops secondhand, she shops thrift, she buys on the real, like, so she's able to afford Dolce and all these beautiful clothes. So I feel like that helped me expand and tell the story in a way that was more fun visually for her.
I did want to ask Rudy one last question about Love Story, because to me, like, the great thing about that show is it really kind of makes you as a viewer fall in love with them as they're falling in love with each other. And I'm wondering if that was something that was on your mind in terms of the costumes.
Yeah, I mean, there was one note from Ryan was he said, you know, it's in the title, it's Love Story, so anytime you can make it feel romantic or sexy or, you know, just real, do that. And so yeah, that's how I approached it. And, you know, as you said, there were, you know, hundreds and hundreds of photos of the two of them, but it was looking at those and it's like, you know, yes, she's wearing Yohji and Prada and all of these incredible designers, but like, how does that translate into our story? You know, like, 'cause she's not wearing that ball gown, you know, at 2 a.m. at home. And so it was, you know, that was sort of the dance of, you know, how to take those real outfits that they wore, but translate them into the show.
Well, thank you all so much for doing this, for talking with me. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.